know, the first thing is, I want to bow to the Spirit within each of you. And to say that this is totally unfair. How do you expect me to say anything after all of that? As Thomas Aquinas said, my words will seem like straw. But anyway, I'll give it a shot. So, we've looked at see thee more clearly. We've looked at love thee more dearly. So I'm going to try to take a stab at to follow thee more nearly. What does it mean to follow God? Why would you want to follow anyone? Isn't there a danger of following someone that you let them control you and give up your free will? Well, normally with humans, the answer is yes. But with God, our heavenly universal Father, the most loving, beautiful, truth-filled, and full of goodness being that we can possibly imagine, the answer is, sign me up. All right? Let me hear you say, sign me up. All right. And every time you hear those words in this talk, sign me up, I want to hear it. Sign me up. All right. So not long ago, I was in a study group, and we were reading about the thought adjuster. And it said that the thought adjuster is imprisoned in our minds. Paper 107, the introduction, paragraphs 2 and 6, imprisoned. I was stunned. I know I'd probably read it before, but it just really hit me. Can you imagine a thought adjuster being imprisoned? Well, that hardly seems fair to imprison such a loving being. So I asked myself, what will I need to do to get my thought adjuster out of jail? Can I buy a get out of jail card and give it to him? What about an escape plan or a prison break? I was filled with indignation that such a cruel fate had befallen my thought adjuster. As thoughts flooded my mind, I began to have this imaginary conversation with my thought adjuster. And it went something like this. So me is going to be me, and TA is my thought adjuster responding. And I hope I haven't said anything that will be offensive or whatever to my thought adjuster and to all thought adjusters. So here's me. Hey, how are you? I am so sorry this happened to you. How did you end up being imprisoned? Thought adjuster. Well, I volunteered to be imprisoned. Volunteered? Why on earth would you do that? It's because I love you so much. You mean it's my fault? It is not your fault. It is part of our Father's plan that we begin our partnership this way. How long do you have to stay imprisoned? Well, that is really up to you. Up to me? Are you kidding me? Let me talk to your parole board to see what I can do to get you out. Well, the parole board, as you call it, has already determined the criteria by which I can be released into your custody. My custody? Yes, the time I can be free is when I spend time with you. Wow, I don't know. You know, I have a life partner, children, a job. I am so busy, I just don't know how much time I can spare to spend with you. I understand, TA. And I admire all that you are doing and see all of your future potential. It is okay. I am comfortable. But I miss your company. Is there any way you could come to visit with me? Because when you do, I get a temporary release from the prison. Well, how far is the prison, and how often would you want me to come and visit? Well, the prison is in your mind, so there is no travel time involved. You just have to say hello, and I'm released to be with you. Me. Well, what do we do together? Do you play cards? Watch sports? Do you like to watch romantic comedies? Thought adjuster. Well, you can do all those things with your human companions. I'm more interested in developing a personal relationship with you, helping you to know our Heavenly Father more, and guiding you on your spiritual journey. Do you think you could take some time to do that? Well, if that's what it takes to get you out of prison, I'll give it a try. Thought adjuster. The more you try, the more our Father's blessings will flow into your life. Eventually, you will sense my presence and make me a part of your life. And that is enough to free me into your custody forever and not be imprisoned anymore. In time, you and I will become as one as we continue our journey to find our Father in paradise. Me. Okay, sign me up. Sign me up. All right. But earlier you mentioned the parole board has already determined criteria for you to be released into my custody. What are the criteria? Thought adjuster. Well, there are 4 things you need to do to get me released and keep me released. Oh, wow. How much is this going to cost me? I don't have a lot of money. Money has nothing to do with it. Let me explain. Do you remember this guy named Jesus that is talked about in the Urantia book? Yeah, I read about him once in a while and occasionally attend a study group or a Urantia University cafe about him. I even went to a summer study session once. The speakers and workshop leaders were okay, but the people were great. That is good. But let us take a more serious approach. Jesus said, if you have seen him, you have seen the Father. That means he is the best example of how to follow God and become more like him. Doesn't your Urantia book say in paper 196, section 1, paragraph 3, that of all, A-L-L, all, human knowledge, that which is of greatest value is to know the religious life of Jesus and how he lived it. Wow. Can you make a more powerful statement that says, hello, this is the way? Well, I don't have the book memorized, but I'm sure you're right. If we examine the life of Jesus, there are 4 practices that he used to follow God and become more like him. These are the same 4 practices that the parole board wants you to go to do and get me out of prison. I want you to study and practice these 4 things. Practice the presence of God. Pray and worship. I know that's 2, but I kind of combined them into 1 so it doesn't seem so difficult there. Number 3, learn to see our Father in all your fellow humans. Number 4, serve your brothers and sisters. As you do these 4 things, I am released from imprisonment to be with you and in your custody. Can you do this for me? Yes. Sign me up. Let me hear it. Sign me up. All right. So after this imaginary conversation, I began to think about what these 4 practices mean and why they were so important to Jesus as they showed us how to follow God. Practicing the presence of God. Well, in order to feel God's presence, in order to understand and begin that friendship with Him, I'm going to have to build a relationship. And how do you start building a relationship with anyone that you want to make your friend? You have to spend some time with them. Imagine that. You turn off the TV and you get all away from all the distractions of life, and you begin to talk with them and you begin to experience them. Okay? So how do I do that? Again, the same way you would start a relationship with anyone. You have to set some time aside to be with them, where there is no interference of the usual distractions of life. Well, what do I do? Talk, listen, pray, worship, laugh, cry, sing, confess, to name a few. That should get you started. Don't expect a booming voice answer to your prayers and questions. Suppose I ask God if I should move to another city, and all of a sudden I hear this booming voice say, "Don't move." Oh my gosh. You know what's going to happen? I will never make another decision in my life waiting to hear for God to tell me what to do. So God doesn't speak to us in that way. But I would suggest that the more we make God our partner in life, the more He is able to communicate with us through the still small voice that emerges as a thought in our minds. We must trust God's wisdom to know when and how much of His communication we can handle without freaking out or becoming fanatical. Another great advantage of making our Heavenly Father our partner in life is that we never have to feel alone. I mean, let's face it, haven't we all felt alone at some time, and maybe still do at times? Of course, we all desire and relish human companionship in spite of its lack of unconditional love. But why not create a relationship with the one person who knows you better than anyone? He will become your best friend, counselor, mentor, co-worker, and everything else you want in an ideal partnership. In everything you do, you can begin to feel His presence with you and help you abandon all anxiety and fear, which you feel mostly because you think you have to face life and your problems alone. Number 2, pray and worship. Well, you know, the Urantia book has a lot to say, and we know that the basic distinction between prayer and worship is that in prayer we're always asking for something, whereas in worship it's pure gratitude and adoration. But why should we pray? I mean, sometimes, people say, well, God already knows what we need, so what's the point of saying it? It doesn't seem to make any difference. And then I came across this place, and it dawned on me that prayer is not for God, it's for us. We are the ones who are going to benefit from it. We can't make offerings or sacrifices or bribe God to change His mind or give us undue favor. So obviously we have to abandon all that. So in paper 196, section 0, paragraph 10, it says, when you study the career of the Master as concerns prayer or any other feature of the religious life, look not so much for what He taught as for what He did. Jesus never prayed as a religious duty. To Him, prayer was, and then they go on to list 22 benefits that Jesus received in praying. So my attitude is, hey, if there's 22 benefits and it's good enough for Jesus, I ought to do it. Sign me up. Yeah, all right. What about worship? You know, I've heard many explanations of worship and have found it more difficult to understand than prayer. One of the things I've realized is that worship is not a passive process of just communing or being with God, just sitting with God. Rather, worship is an active process of offering thanksgiving and or adoration to God. You know, I thought about when I went to musical concerts and live performances, and what happens at the end. People stand up, bravo, encore, wave lights, and they're thrilled, and they're giving praise and adoration to this people who are doing this performance. And here we do that, but yet we can't give any praise and adoration to the Father in heaven? And I asked myself why I struggled with this. And you know, like all of us, my life hasn't necessarily been so easy. We face all of those vicissitudes of various kinds. And so it dawned on me, perhaps what was happening is I was focusing too much on the past and the present. And I could conjure up some beautiful memories, a few of them, and sometimes that would help me put myself into that more gracious mode, giving gratitude and so on. But then I thought, well, what if I look to the future? Oh my gosh. What is in store for us? I began to imagine what those beautiful Edenic gardens were going to look like, what that angelic music was going to sound like, what all of those loving beings and surrounded in love all the time was going to feel like. All of a sudden, I had no problem thanking God. All of a sudden, I had no problem giving God adoration. So for me, that helps me move into that state of worship when I can see what is in store, when I can see that future and what lies ahead for us. Oh, number 3. Learning to see God in our fellow human beings. Oh my. Let's face it, some of our fellow human beings are not so lovable. Especially those whose politics, religious beliefs, and even gender make them impossible to comprehend. How on earth am I supposed to see God within them? Well, there are 2 techniques that I've found that have helped me, obviously derived from the Urantia book, but helped me with this. The first one, ask yourself this. When your child did things, even maybe said because you didn't give them what they wanted, I hate you, Mom, I hate you, Dad. You didn't like what they said, but did you stop loving them? Of course not. So begin to see all your fellow humans as little children who act poorly due to immaturity or lack of learning a better way. One of the best things I did in terms of that is I changed my expectations of other humans. In the big picture, we're still little children. Yeah, I know we're in older bodies, but we're still pretty immature in the cosmic sense. So why is it easy to forgive little children? Because we don't have such expectations from them. We expect them to make mistakes. We expect them to do things that aren't so nice sometimes. And did Jesus not tell us, I want for you to have more than just brotherly and sisterly love for each other. I want you to love each other the way I love you, which is parental love. So we have to elevate our love for each other and see each other in that loving light of children of God. For example, imagine them as standing next to you in the core of the finality, smiling and loving you. And someday they will be, no matter what they say to you now, no matter what their behavior now. Jesus said it best, love the sinner, hate the sin. We have to learn to separate the actions and the things that people say from that God-destined person. Imagine yourself if you were talking to their thought adjuster. How respectful would you be? You can have self-righteous indignation toward their words and behavior while still loving them. Think back when Jesus was admonishing the Sadducees and the Pharisees. I mean, he was pretty harsh and pretty stern in some of the things that he said. But he never said it without loving them as he said it. So even though he disapproved of their lack of accepting the new gospel, he still loved them. So we have to learn to see that in each other. We have to see that that good person is still there inside, and still have respect for that good person, and know that one day they will see a better way. Think again, when we admonished or even punished our children, we didn't stop loving them. And again, Jesus is asking us to see our brothers and sisters in that way. The other technique is to ask myself, what is their motivation for what they're doing? You know that passage in the book about the caveman and the saber-toothed tiger? Boy, oh boy, that really stuck with me. So if I take the time and try to uncover people's motivations, it really does help understand them better. And when you understand them better, again, you may not agree, but you will feel that compassion for them. And eventually that compassion makes you love them. So it was mentioned about my favorite group and my favorite song. And you know, those of you, you may not know, but there were members of the Moody Blues who clearly were familiar with the Urantia book. That's been fairly well documented. And so this particular song that I like, it is the Moody Blues, I think, trying to get this message across to us in their music. So I'm just going to give you the lyrics.
Have you ever wondered what a particle really is at the deepest possible level? When we talk about electrons, quarks and neutrinos,
I don't know where that came from. So it says, after he had journeyed, and his feet were sore, and he was tired, he came upon an orange grove, and he rested, and he lay in the cool. And while he rested, he took to himself an orange and tasted it, and it was good. And he felt the earth to his spine. And he asked, and he saw the tree above him, and the stars, and the veins in the leaf, and the light, and the balance, and he saw magnificent perfection. Whereon he thought of himself in balance, and he knew he was. Just open your eyes and realize the way it's always been. Just open your mind and you will find the way it's always been. Just open your heart, and that's a start. But here's the best part. And he thought of those he angered, for he was not a violent man. And he thought of those he hurt, for he was not a cruel man. And he thought of those he frightened, for he was not an evil man. And he understood. He understood himself. Upon this he knew that when he was of anger or knew hurt or felt fear, it was because he was not understanding. And he learned compassion. And with his eye of compassion, he saw his enemies like unto himself. And he learned love. Then he was answered. So, just another beautiful expression of this idea of taking the time to try to find and understand other people's motivations. Number 4, service to others. Wow. The philosophers asked the question, why is there something rather than nothing? In other words, why did the I Am ever begin creation at all? Didn't have to. And of course, the answer is love. The book tells us in paper 56, section 10, paragraph 21, love is the desire to do good to others. God wanted to share his love. It's pretty simple and straightforward. So he created. So service to others is how we practice loving them. The more we love our fellow humans, the more we want to serve. The more we feel the love of our Father, the more our cup runneth over, and we want to share that love through service. Imagine that you are in a classroom taught by the Melchizedeks in the local universe of Nebanon. As you look around, who needs your service? Everyone is clothed and fed. Everyone is fused with a thought adjuster. How can you be of service? Other than going out on a mission to some troubled world like ours, I don't have an answer to that question. But here on Urantia, opportunities for service abound. Everyone you meet is struggling to cope with the vicissitudes of life. And we know that Jesus did most of his personal ministry just by listening, by letting troubled souls unburden their confusions to him. Jesus once said, "Why do you call me good?" That just sort of blew me away. He's so focused on the other individual, so focused on what the other person needs, so focused on serving them, that he just assumes that that's the way that you do it. So why do you need to say it's special or it's good? Isn't that the way everybody ought to be doing it? Now, of course, for us, for me, that's not always the way. I often want to get my own self in there, right? So, how can we keep ourselves out of it? How do we focus entirely on that other person and try to focus on what they need and not what we need? Our book tells us that in the end of life, so to speak, there is but one struggle, the struggle of faith against doubt. Everyone you meet is fighting this battle. Every smile, kind gesture, hug, listening, companionship, snippet of truth, sharing beautiful music and art, walking together in nature are all just a few of the untold ways you can help others fight this battle of faith. I would even suggest to you that the greatest personal value of this conference is our growth in faith. Being immersed for a few days in mutual beauty, truth, and goodness that we have experienced here reverberates in our soul. And it's growing our faith that this spiritual path is real. As soldiers of the circles, as spiritual pioneers of the new religion of personal experience, we are a privileged group. The Urantia book has helped me see God more clearly. This new understanding of God and His ways compel me to love Him more dearly. And your sharing your love, truth, beauty, and goodness with me at this conference proves to me that our Father's way is what I want to follow. If you ask me if I want to be part of our Father's family and all I have to do is follow His way, my answer is a resounding, sign me up. So I was kind of debating about how to conclude the talk. And I was at lunch, having lunch with some of you. And we were kind of sharing some personal stories. And I shared one about my brother. And someone named Guard said, "Wow, you ought to include that in your talk." The light shone, and so, okay, all right, I'll do that. So here's the story, and it ties in with the way Andrea began. So this will, in effect, kind of close that circle. So one of my younger brothers is about 4.5 years younger than I, okay? So after high school, I was in the service for 4 years. So when I got out, we started college together. And we became best friends. He was not only my physical brother, he became my spiritual brother. He was the first person that I introduced the Urantia book to. And we would sit up having those discussions, comparing and contrasting what the Urantia book said with these other things we'd been studying and so on. But eventually, of course, we both fall in love, with the Urantia book. So through my life, he's been my best friend and that I've had on this planet. A few years ago, he began to show signs of dementia. And he was driving somewhere and called us and said, "I don't know where I am." So we had to find him and get him home. And of course, gradually it gets worse and leads eventually to Alzheimer's. But in the process, we would have lunch together. And it was always such a bittersweet situation. Because knowing the Urantia book, he would say to me, "Mike, look, if this gets worse and my thought adjuster can no longer grow my soul, well, what's the point of staying alive? I'm just a physical body. I'm just a physical shell." So he was contemplating suicide, of course. I would never pass judgment on him. And I would never, of course, tell him what to do. I would only listen and say, "Well, what about this? What about that?" Just sort of trying to help him process the things. So this went on for a while. And at one lunch, he said, "I've decided that I will not take my life. I've decided that I will let my life play out because I want to show my faith to the end. I want to show my children that I have followed God in my best way of understanding to the end." And so I thank my brother for giving me such a wonderful example of what it means to follow God as best we understand. So, thank you all for listening. Appreciate it there.